I guess, where and when were you born?
Right, well, I was born on the 10th of July 1921, as you know, in a place called Buckhurst Hill, which is 10 miles north of the City of London.
Right.
In those days, in 21, it was just a village, and there was a greenery between us and the next village, which was Woodford. And then after Woodford, then it got to be town and London.
Yeah.
But, my grandfather was a doctor, and he brought me up mostly because my parents were moving around a lot.
Okay.
Dad was in the Royal Air Force. He came out of the Royal Flying Corps to begin with, came out in 1919, and then he went to work with various wireless manufacturers.
Right.
It was called wireless and not radio in those days.
Was he a pilot in the...
Yes, he was.
He was.
Originally, he was 19th Hussars cavalry, but the cavalry were plundered for officers to join the Royal Flying Corps in 16.
Okay.
And he became not a pilot, but the observer. And then in 1918, he was sent to flying school and became a pilot.
Okay.
Unfortunately, he had an accident towards the end of the war, about 3 months before the war ended. Got badly burnt in an aeroplane, and that was the end of his war.
Right.
So I was born in Buckhurst Hill and brought up there most of my life, except for during school holidays I would go to my parents wherever they were living, mostly in Coventry or near Birmingham. Oh, sorry, choking over the coffee. We'll have to edit this.
No, yeah, don't worry about it. I edit most, so, yeah.
And I went to a preparatory school, as they're called, which we would call here a junior or elementary school.
Oh, okay.
And as a boarder when I was 6. And I left there when I was 12 and went to my public school, which was Chigwell Grammar School, which was only about 5 miles from where we lived at Buckhurst Hill. And I did classics at school. I was a classical scholar, Latin, Greek.
All right.
And at the end of my term there in 1937, when I left school, I was in the upper sixth form. We had, out of 36 school periods a week, we had 30 Latin and Greek, and the rest maths or English. So it was pretty solid classical education.
Yeah. Did you have any brothers or sisters?
Yes, I have. I had a younger brother. He was 6 years older, younger than me, and a sister who was 13 years younger than me.
Oh, okay.
Unfortunately, they both died now.
Right.
Yes, so as I say, I left when I was just over 16, I think it was, and then I'd got my matriculation, Oxford and Cambridge matriculation, but I wanted to go to London University to read electrical engineering, and they wouldn't take me because I hadn't got London matriculation. So I had to go to a cramming school, as they're called, in London, which just force-feed you with what's necessary. And I think I did 5 subjects. I think I did Latin for one, I did English for another, I did maths for another, and Latin and Greek, English, maths, and I had to fill in for the last one, so I did divinity. And that's the last time I did anything to do with divinity. But it was nice and easy because there's only one book to read, isn't there?
That's right.
So I got my London matric as well, so I was dual qualified there.
So you always had an interest in engineering?
Yes, well, my father, as I said, was in wireless companies, and when I was 10, he introduced me to building wireless sets.
Okay.
So I built a crystal set to begin
So you got
with.
the bug from there?
And started from there. And then I built a 1 valve, and then I bought made a 2 valve one, and so on. And then I started later, when I was 16, building a transmitter, but for various reasons that didn't get finished.
Right.
Anyhow, so on I went to university, Queen Mary College and London University, and I think really I was a bit immature at that time, and I discovered girls, and I discovered beer, and the first year at my college was an unmitigated disaster.
Well, things haven't changed, it still happens today.
And the only subject I really passed in was chemistry, and oddly enough I got 100% in my practical chemistry. Now, whether that was because it was taken by a woman, I don't know, but
How to impress?
History doesn't relate.
Yeah.
Considering she was nearly 70 when Professor Stratford, I don't think he was... yes. Well, anyhow, that was in August when I got the results, and my father, who was then, I don't know where he was, I think Coventry, got to hear about it and sent me a postcard, which was rather nasty of him because the postman can read it. And on it was, disgusted with your results, suggest you join the church, the army or the police force. Let me know by Friday. Well, I got this thing on Wednesday. So anyhow, I looked at this and I thought, well, I've got to do something. Oh, the war, of course, was only a matter of a month away, and we all knew it. And I had been trying to join, for the last year, the Territorial Army, the same as the CMF here. And because of the impending war, everybody was rushing to join, and all the regiments were full. And I tried to get into the 4th Essex, the 4th Battalion of the Essex Regiment. I'm glad I didn't, because they were decimated at Dunkirk. And I think only 50 out of the 600 came out of Dunkirk. So there, but for the grace of God, would have gone high. I decided the church wasn't on for me.
Scratch that one.
Yes, for various reasons, which I perhaps better not say now. The police would have been an idea, but unfortunately Lord Trenchard, who was the Home Office man, or man in charge of all police, he wasn't a policeman, but he was a politician in charge, decided that officers, that is to say ranks beginning with inspector, should have degrees. Well, of course that put me right out, so I thought, oh well, the army. As I say, I'd been trying to join. So I wrote to my father, said, I'm going to join the army. He said, good. He said, well, I'm going to join the Air Force. And he said, I'm going to join as another rank, because I'm not disclosing my previous. He said, I bet I will get to Sergeant Major before you do. So I went down to Enfield and knocked on the door of 48th Light Anti-Aircraft Battery, and woke the adjutant up at 7 o'clock in the morning, much to his disgust, and joined the army. And I think you've seen that joining paper. It was in that compendium you made up of photographs. So, my father got to Sergeant Major long before I even got to Lance Corporal, so I lost the bet there. And then he nearly got court-martialed himself because he hadn't declared his previous service. And he was immediately commissioned and then served the rest of the war fitting wireless sets and radar into bombers. Because by that time he was what? He was something like 39, he was 50 odd. So then I spent, from then until, let's see, when was it? October 41, I spent as another rank, or rather till March 42, that's right. Came back from Gibraltar in October 41 on the Prince of Wales, which was quite an exciting trip.
I bet.
Especially as we had an alarm halfway across the Atlantic that the Gneisenau and Scharnhorst had been seen somewhere out near South America. So we went tearing down there at 30-odd knots, leaving our destroyer escort behind because they couldn't keep up because of the heavy seas. And finally we sent off a walrus, the carrier walrus, which was catapulted off the deck, and he did a survey, a recce to see what it was. And it wasn't, it was two of our own ships. It was the two cruisers. I can't remember the name. Was it the Arethusa? Doesn't matter, but two cruisers. So poor old, of course, the poor old flying boat, the walrus, can't get back. Well, he can get back, but he can't be taken on the ship. So he landed and was picked up, and that was it. So then we went to Scarpa Flow after that. And we had quite an interesting experience in Scarpa Flow, although I can't find anybody who can tell me whether I was dreaming it or not. But there were only 12 of us, Army fellows, on the Prince of Wales, all from the same regiment. And as we were coming into Scarpa Flow, they have a boom defence system there at the time, which were nets hung from large pontoons.
Okay.
And there's a gate of pontoons in the middle, which is hauled aside by what are known as boom defence ships. Right. They're rather like a very big tug.
Yeah.
Flat sterns with enormous winches on the stern to wind the cables up to open the gate. Well, the Prince of Wales was going so slowly that the wind drifted her off. Instead of going through the gate, she ran over the boom defence and got a wire on the outer port propeller, four engines, of course, and wound this up. And I can remember now seeing the wire screaming off the winch with sparks going everywhere of this boom defence ship, until finally it came to its bitter end, and the ship started to tilt backwards with the stern being dragged underwater. Yeah. And all the crew were jumping off. Well, finally the wire broke, and it came back again, and we sailed majestically on, trailing wires behind us. Now, whether that did happen or not, I don't know, but it's so embedded in my memory, it must have done. Well, sorry, that was a digression, but coming back to my history, October, as I say, 41, and then I did nothing for 6 months. It was bloody boring at Woolwich, and they couldn't find anything else to do because they weren't ready for us at the Officer Cadet Training Unit near Swindon. And so we were messing about at Woolwich, doing virtually nothing. We couldn't, except that for a time they did put us on an anti-aircraft gun, and we did have a few shots at the enemy, but most of the time, I say, a waste of time. So I went to Octu in March, and we were only supposed to be there for 4 months, I think it was, but it carried on longer because we moved from near Swindon at a place called Shrivenham, where we were, with wonderful barracks, absolutely magnificent. But the Americans wanted it, that particular barracks, so we had to move to Wales, to Tonfanau on the coast. A really rubbishy barracks, but beautiful country. And I spent 2 months there marching over Cadair Idris and up and down the Welsh mountains. I was as fit as a Mallee bull by the time I'd finished there. Commissioned in November 42, and then I went to a regiment in Manchester where I met Joan. Oh, I'm sorry, I've moved that.
That's all right.
You better check that is... Yep, it's all right. I'll try not to do that again. Yes, and that was sort of the beginning of that.
Okay.
And so in March, I was posted to an unknown destination. Got on the troop ship and finally decanted at a place called Philippeville in North Africa, in Algeria. And I was posted to the artillery depot and school, and found myself as MTO, Motor Transport Officer, for the whole of the depot. And that was very interesting, because I had to go frequently to a place called Mondovi, which is on the Tunisian border, for spare parts and that sort of thing. 500 or 600 miles, I think, or I don't know, I can't remember the exact distance, but travelling through Algeria was very, very interesting. Thoroughly enjoyed it. The war had passed on by then. So from then we went, after 6 months there, we went to Italy, and that was quite interesting. I had to take all my transport on an American ship, a heavy lift ship. It was actually an American Liberty boat, the ones they built inland in bits and pieces and assembled on the coast. And the one we went in was called the Fort Fiddler. And it was incredible because being welded construction, which is quite new because all the ships up to that date had been riveted, they didn't quite get it right. And the stresses were such that there was a crack all the way down the superstructure from the monkey bridge all the way down through the main bridge, through the officers' saloon, down to the main deck. And this crack would move as in the sea, which was a bit disconcerting. Anyhow, I had to load all my transport, which was done on a big jumbo derrick, and I think it was a 100-ton derrick. And somebody came along as I'd got all my stuff nearly arranged to go on. I hadn't started loading it. And a fellow came along from the tank corps and said, oh, he said, there's 12 Churchills got to go on the bottom before your stuff goes on. And I said, all right, well, I'll hang around while you get them on. He said, no, I've got to go. He said, you've got to load them. I said, well, I don't know anything about Churchills. He said, well, I'll give you a rundown. He gave me 10 minutes inside one and said, this is how it works. Yeah. And so anyhow, they were loaded with this enormous crane, and I had to manoeuvre them in the hold so that they were in place, which was a bit, well, I sweated a bit over that, because there wasn't much room more than about 6 or 7 inches between each one by the time we'd finished.
How were they fixed once they were...
Sorry?
How were the Churchills fixed in place once you...
Oh, chained.
So you had an exact spot where they...
Oh, yeah, yep. Anyhow, that was quite interesting. We had to re-reeve the jumbo derrick because it started to fray the wire. And I think if I remember rightly, there were 6-part sheaves. The pulleys were 6 pulleys at the top and 6 at the bottom because of the enormous weight. And you've never seen so much wire rope laid out on the deck while we were threading it through the pulleys. It was quite interesting. So then we went on to Catania in Sicily, and from there to Naples. We arrived in Naples at the end of the 1942 eruption of Vesuvius, and that was quite a sight. It was still smoking, and
yeah, I've got photographs.
Don't think there was any lava coming out by this time, but there was a mass of ashes had come out, and there's a village about 15 miles from Naples called San Severino, and there were 7 to 8 feet of ash in the street there. I didn't see it, but I saw photographs of it. Yeah. But I saw places like Nocera, where our hospital was, and they'd got 8 or 9 inches of ash there. So on to our new camp in down south of Salerno, and there was a hell of a big epidemic of typhus going around. Typhus, I don't know much about it, but it's caused by bugs, like a bed bug sort of thing. And so we were all dusted with DDT. And they had a puffer, handheld puffer, full of powder, DDT powder. And you had to take your tie off if you were wearing one, open your shirt collar, and an NCO would stick this puffer down the back of your neck and down your front and puff till you came dust in every direction. I mean, I hate to think of the effects of that. And we were advised to shave all our bodily hair because that's where the bugs...
Okay, that's what I mean.
So a lot of us look very funny with bald heads. But, yeah, okay, well, I spent 2.5 years then in Italy.
2.5 years?
Yes, with the depot, and not all the time actually. Then I wanted to join REMI, the workshop people, but unfortunately, again, I hadn't got a degree, so although I did 6 months with them and could have gone in, they insisted on a degree, so that fell flat. But I was doing wireless at the time. That was quite interesting for a short time.
Yep.
And then, I had all sorts of odd jobs. I did a lot of sailing there, and I had the pleasure of skippering a 200-ton schooner, which was good fun. Yes, so 2.5 years there, then back to England. And I went to the School of Artillery Anti-Aircraft Division down in Manorbier in South Wales.
Right.
By this time, of course, I'd come back and met Joan again, and we were well established as
future man and wife?
not man and wife yet, no, we didn't get married in 47.
That's right, yeah.
And I went to the School of Artillery there, and that as transport officer, and that was very interesting, nice job. And from then, I had to decide what I was going to do, because being a temporary officer, just a wartime officer, I was liable to be discharged at any minute. So I applied for a regular commission, and I went to a selection board in Wiltshire. Very interesting, where you were given all sorts of psychological tests, you know, these, I don't know what they call them these days, but, and you were formed into groups of, say, 4 or 5, and given a task to do, simple but silly things. You were given a 6-inch depression in the ground, which represents a river, and you were given a couple of planks and a piece of rope and told to get all your people across the other side. And of course, the rope didn't go as far as the other side, neither did the planks. And, this sort of, you know, stupidity. Yeah. I think that all it was to make sure you didn't argue, or you teamwork and this sort of thing. Anyhow, I managed to pass it all right, and I had selected to go into the Royal Army Service Corps. In retrospect, that was an incredibly bad choice, but I wanted to do it because my interest in transport at the time. What I hadn't realised that the Service Corps was riddled with political matters. I don't mean political like Labour, but political. The politics of the regiment, as you might say.
The bureaucracy of it all, wasn't it?
Well, not so much bureaucracy, it was, I hope I don't offend anybody, but the powers that be were either Catholic or they were Masons. And if you weren't one or the other, there was no chance of promotion. And they'd split the thing up nicely between them, so that every 3 years the boss jobs went to the alternate ones. Well, I'm afraid I was a bit of a rebel at this time, and so I thought, well, the only answer to do is to go on some courses which will help me for the future. So I asked to go on the motor engineering course, because we hadn't lost our workshops by this time. We were still had our workshops, and I wanted to be a workshop officer. I went to an 18-month course, which I passed with flying colours, in fact. They only gave me an A-, but having got 97%, and the other fellow who got 97% got an A+. I formed up and I said, "This is not on, I want an A+. So they changed it to an A+. But because I knew I was bloody sight better than the other bloke was. So then we lost our workshops, so of course that put the spike in that. And then I went on several work-study courses, time and motion and work-study courses, which were excellent. And so I got shunted sideways doing work-study for 18 months, all around the country, and there were some very interesting ones there. I'd love to tell you all about that, but I think this is getting too long. But anyhow, you can edit it, can't you? Yeah, very interesting. So then I was given... Oh, before that...
what year were we in?
I'm sorry, wait a minute. Yes, let me go back a bit. I've got to go back. It was 1949. Sorry, I've jumped a lot. 1949 when I went on the motor workshop course. 1950 I was then sent to Singapore, and Joan followed 6 months later because we'd got the sprog and the baby, and they can't travel till they're 6 months old. Anyhow, went to Singapore, and I was running the driver training and motor vehicle technical school there for 3 years.
Did you enjoy it?
Yes and no. It got a bit boring after a time, and especially when I had to teach 40 Siamese soldiers who didn't speak a single word of English. And they gave me one sergeant who was supposed to have had English.
Yeah.
But whether he did or not, I don't know. Whether what he told them, what I was saying, was right or wrong, I have no idea. But it was a nominal 3 weeks course, and they made it 6 because of the difficulties. And it was, I've never had so much boredom in my life as that. Came back to England at the end of '53, did a 6 or 7 months as stores officer for the AER, which was another form of Army Emergency Reserve. It's a similar thing to the CMF, but not quite. It's, they only do once a year or something. It didn't last long. And then I applied to do the long petroleum engineering course, because I thought that's another sideways thing I can do so that I can keep out of the politics. Got accepted and did 18 months. Well, I went to college, back to college to bone up on hydraulics and maths, and then went to Landasi Refinery for over a year, and that was excellent. And so I got my PI, as it's called. That's letters after your name in the military list. And the next thing I did, after I got that, I went to a big petroleum depot where I was OIC technical wing, doing all the technical stuff. And that's when I went to the engineers depot at Mexi, writing handbooks for the bolted steel tanks we were designing. So that was another sort of interesting thing. And then I was promoted major. I was captain at this time. I was promoted major, and I was promoted major before I went to the technical wing, that's right. And then in 1960, and after that I went to the work study. So it was around about 57 I went to work study in London, or south of London. And then in 1960 I was sent to Germany to command a transport company.
How many kids did you have at this stage?
2.
So you had
And by this stage they were, let's see, 1960 Diana would have been 10 and Victoria 12. 12. So
they certainly moved around quite a bit.
Oh yes, my word. They went everywhere we did. So I was commanding 36 Transport Company, which was a car company for all the cars in the British headquarters. I might say that the headquarters in Germany at Rheindahlen was a dual headquarters. There was the British Army of the Rhine, which was our British National Army in Germany, and then there was a headquarters called Northern Army Group, which is the headquarters